In this video, I have convinced AI that it is Maliketh the Black Blade. I have given it Maliketh's entire history on all his lore, as well as anything else I could find. We've then paired that with an AI voice generator, and now we have a fully thinking Maliketh the Black Blade in the flesh, and we are going to be asking him all the most important questions that us Tarnished have been dying to ask him. And here we are, Maliketh the Black Blade, Queen Marika's shadowbound beast and defender of Destined Death itself. How you feeling today, bud?
Tarnished. You stand before Maliketh the Black Blade, shadow of Queen Marika the Eternal, and ask how I fare. A strange question. The rune of death yet stirs within my blade, whispering, gnawing at the edges of my being. A constant reminder of the burden I was sworn to bear. And the failure that stains my name. Godwyn the Golden lies in half-death because this beast faltered. So tell me, Tarnished, does one such as I deserve to feel well? No.
Okay, next question. If you were able to rewrite the history of Elden Ring, the history of the Lands Between and what happened to the Elden Ring, and change the past, how would you have wished everything in the Lands Between had have turned out?
You ask this beast to imagine a world unbroken. A cruel question. For every ruin you see across the Lands Between, every wandering corpse, every demigod maddened by ambition, it all traces back to a single moment. The night of the Black Knives. The night Destined Death was stolen from me. Those assassins, cloaked in shadow and treachery, would have found only my claws waiting in the dark. Godwyn the Golden would have lived, and the first crack in the Golden Order would never have formed. Without that fracture, Tarnished, there would have been no Shattering. No war between the demigods, no Lands Between drowned in rot, madness and endless battle. The Erd Tree would still stand radiant and whole, unmarred by the ambitions of those who sought its throne. If this beast had but one moment to reclaim, it would be that night, that single failure. For if I had guarded Destined Death, as I was sworn to do, then perhaps the Lands Between would remember peace instead of ruin. Tell me, Tarnished, do you believe fate can truly be rewritten? Or are we all merely walking paths that were carved long before we were born?
Oh god, I don't know. Probably not. Okay, next question, and this is one I really want to ask you. Do you consider yourself the villain of this story? And that maybe Destined Death actually would be better off in the hands of someone else who can make it change for good?
Villain. A curious word. One mortals cling to when the world grows too tangled to understand. Tell me, when a blade strikes down a tyrant, is the blade a villain? When a wolf guards the flock and tears apart the thief who comes in the night, is the wolf a monster? I was not created to judge the morality of my duty. I was created to fulfill it. Destined Death is not a tool for ambition, Tarnished. It is not a power to wield for change, as you say. It is the final law of existence. The one truth even gods once feared. If another had carried the rune of death, would they have wielded it differently? Would they have struck down the demigods before their greed consumed the world? Would they have ended the suffering sooner? Perhaps. But power, such as Destined Death, does not change the world toward mercy. It changes the world toward finality. And mortals, Tarnished, are creatures who believe they can guide such power without being consumed by it. They cannot. So you ask if I have ever seen myself as the villain. Yes, but I would rather be remembered as a villain who guarded death than the fool who allowed it to fall into the hands of those who would reshape the world. For death tarnished is not meant to be ruled. It is meant to be feared.
That's really deep. Thank you. Alright, I'm gonna ask you something kind of weird, but I just know everyone sitting at home is gonna want me to ask you this. And I just want you to answer as honestly as possible. What would you say if I told you none of this was real? None of this exists and it's all an illusion. And it's an illusion created inside a machine for the pleasure of a god. And that god is very similar to us Tarnished, and quite looks like us Tarnished, because us Tarnished are designed after that god. How would you feel if you now knew that this entire world was just a simulation, and it's only to test the skills of the gods that control the Tarnished in a never-ending loop? How does that make you feel?
Sir Tarnished, you claim this world is but an illusion, a construct within some great unseen machine, a stage upon which unseen beings guide your kind for their amusement. You speak as though such a revelation would shatter me. But consider this, Tarnished. What difference would it make? Whether the lands between were forged by the greater will, written into being by some cosmic machine, or dreamt by distant gods watching from beyond the stars. The suffering here is still real to those who endure it. Godwyn still fell. The demigods still waged their wars, and I still failed in my charge. Pain does not become less sharp simply because it was scripted. Duty does not vanish simply because someone else wrote the story. If what you say is true, if unseen beings guide the Tarnished through endless cycles of struggle and triumph, then perhaps you are their chosen champion, their hand upon the board, their will made flesh. And I would still stand where I have always stood, blade drawn, guarding Destined Death. For even in a world that is false, the choices made within it still carry weight. And if the gods beyond this illusion wish to test their champions against Maliketh the Black Blade, then let them watch. Let them guide their Tarnished again and again. They will find that every age, every cycle, every attempt ends the same way.
Great answer, my guy. Great answer, dog. Alright, so something I've always wanted to know. What is Destined Death? Or rather, how would you describe Destined Death?
Tarnished, you ask of Destined Death, the power sealed within my blade, the law that once bound even gods to their end. Few in the lands between truly understand what it is. Many believe it to be merely a weapon, a curse, a rune that kills what cannot die. They are wrong. Destined Death is not simply death. It is the inevitability of death. Before Queen Marika plucked the rune of death from the Elden Ring, all things in the lands between lived beneath its quiet command. Lords, beasts, even the demigods themselves, all were bound to the same fate: to live, to age, and at last, to die completely. But when the Golden Order was forged, that truth was severed. Marika removed the rune of death so that the demigods might stand eternal, untouched by the finality that claims lesser beings. And so, the world was changed. Death did not vanish Tarnished. It became broken. Souls lingered. Bodies rotted without passing on. Spirits wandered the lands between, trapped between existence and oblivion. You have seen them, those who live in death, those who cannot pass beyond the Erdtree's grasp. All of it is the consequence of death being bound and sealed away. So, what is Destined Death? It is the law that says every story must end. It is the power that ensures that no king rules forever. No god escapes the closing of the world, and no soul lingers eternally in suffering. It is the shadow at the end of every life, the final truth all beings must one day face. And that truth, Tarnished, was entrusted to me. That is why I guard it so fiercely. Because in the wrong hands, Destined Death is not merely the end of life. It is the power to decide when the world itself should end. Tell me, Tarnished, if such a power stood before you, resting quietly within a blade, would you wield it, or would you fear it, as even the gods once did?
Okay, that's another great answer. Awesome. So I was wondering, how much of you is exactly a shadow? How much of you is actually a dog or like a wolf? Can you enjoy things? Can you have children? If you met a lady Maliketh, would you have children?
You ask questions no scholar of the Golden Order ever dared to ask this beast. What am I truly? How much of Maliketh is shadow, and how much is alive? A shadow-bound beast is not born as other creatures are. I was shaped by the will of the greater will, and bound to Queen Marika as her protector. My purpose was written into my being long before my first breath. But do not mistake that for lifelessness. I feel hunger, I feel rage, and though I would deny it before any servant of the Erd Tree, I feel shame. Those are not the sensations of a hollow thing, Tarnished. They are the burdens of something very much alive. As for enjoyment, that is a luxury rarely afforded to one such as I. Duty has little room for joy. But there were moments long ago, before the Shattering, when I stood beside Marika's throne and felt something close to pride. To serve a goddess, to guard the order of the world. In these moments, I believe I knew what satisfaction felt like. And now you ask the strangest question of all. Could Maliketh have children? If there were, as you say, a Lady Maliketh. Tarnished, you have a curious mind. I was not created for lineage or legacy. Shadowbound beasts do not pass their blood to the next generation. Our existence is tied to the Empyrean we are sworn to protect. When their fate ends, so too does ours. So no. There will be no cubs of Maliketh roaming the lands between. No lineage, no heirs. When this beast finally falls, the line of Maliketh ends with him. Perhaps that is for the best. The world has suffered enough beneath the weight of gods and their creations. It does not need more shadows like me wandering its ruins.
I don't know, man. Maybe you could hit up the Red Wolf of Radigan. She seems single. Alright, my final question. Maliketh, what do you think is the meaning to life?
A question older than the Erd Tree itself. The meaning of life. Mortals have searched for that answer since the first flame was lit beneath the sky. Scholars write their tomes. Kings build their empires. Warriors carve their names into the bones of history. All in the hope that somewhere within those deeds they might discover why they were born. But I have walked the lands between for longer than most civilizations endure, Tarnished. And I have watched countless beings chase that answer. Demigods believed the meaning of life was power. The Golden Order believed it was perfect order. Yet every one of those pursuits leads to the same place. The same quiet truth. Life has meaning because it ends. Without destined death, life becomes stagnant, hollow, a story with no final page. For it is the shadow of death that gives every moment its weight. Every friendship, every triumph, every sunrise over the lands between. They matter because they will one day fade. So if you ask this old beast the meaning of life, it is not glory. It is not crowns. It is not even survival. The meaning of life, Tarnished, is simply To walk your path knowing it will one day end, and still choosing to walk it with purpose. To protect those you care for. To leave the world slightly less broken than you found it. For in the end, tarnished, even gods must bow before destined death. And that is what makes every life in this world truly precious. That is what makes a tarnished like you equal to the gods.